Good morning, boils and ghouls. Today I have for you another lovely process video, but this time I thought I would speak a little bit more generally about some of the principles and things I think of when painting. First of all, this was a watercolor painting done completely in water in my sketchbook, which is not a heavy enough weight to do watercolor. It is, you can kind of see it off to the side on my phone there, a heavily referenced from a photograph I took of a childhood friend's house in their neighborhood, which means it is copyright free. I set up the composition for myself, and that composition and some of the details is one less thing I have to worry about. So in a painting like this, some of the main things I think about are trying to work from lightest to darkest, because this is watercolor. You can't really go over a darker color with a lighter one and have it show up at all. I try to think about my color relationships to each other, and I try typically to work from larger shapes to smaller shapes, as well as sometimes from the foreground to the background. This was streamed live on my Twitch channel, which I will link below. I still stream there twice a week. If you are ever interested in talking about art and working alongside me, that's something that I've found to be very helpful for my mental focus, so I've been keeping it up for the last couple years now. So, one of the things on the list was sometimes working from foreground to background. In this case, this painting's focus is actually in the middle ground. I want that house to be focused on the most. So to give myself the maximum amount of time and detail, I worked on some vaguer shapes and colors in the background, did a light wash of the general shape of the house so I can get the composition right, and then finished up with a few somewhat more detailed bits of the trees in the background. This just kind of helps me give myself a stopping point, because I am the type of painter and artist who will continue to work and even potentially overwork a piece when it could have stayed where it was and still show the level of detail and focus that was necessary for the piece. I'm not a hyper-realist painter, and depending on the work you do, the way you think about these things might be a little bit different, but I think generally they do apply for a lot of different painting and drawing styles. Another thing I mentioned is the color relationships. So I only have 2 paint palettes that I work from that are both vintage and essentially the same pigments, or I imagine very close. So quite often I don't have the literal pigments that will identically match what I'm painting from, which is not really a problem if you can make the colors you have suggest the right relationships. For example, the majority of the house in this painting is a warmer tone, so kind of a neutral yellow as the base with darker red browns and cooler dark red browns and some of the certain shadow details, but it looks significantly warmer compared to the greens in the very foreground and a lot of the blues in the very background. It can be difficult to get these right. It's a lot of trial and error and seeing how things dry once it's been put on the page, and just mixing and remixing again some of your colors. So don't be afraid to experiment, but generally thinking of things less in the literal, well, this house is tan and these trees are green, and more along the lines of trees in the very foreground closer to the sky are more of a blue tone because of the way it fades into the background, and the red of the roof, or the brown of the roof in this case, is a hotter color, so I'm going to use more oranges. I'm just thinking more in warm versus cool versus literal local color is one of the things that has helped me the absolute most. And again, to prevent myself from overworking paintings, especially in traditional media, working from very large flat brushes and general large shapes to smaller ones helps me a lot. So doing base layers of lighter versions of the final color I need helps me plan my composition if I don't do a pencil sketch first. And by forcing myself to use a slightly smaller brush, one, it gives me a better point and better detail, and two, that means how much paint I have on my brush changes. So, for example, you saw me laying in some of those really dark, really small lines with a medium to small brush. That means I have more control over how dark the pigment is, and once I get to a certain level of darkness, I know the rest of my values will adjust properly, hopefully, and if not, I can go and fix it from there. But working from large general shapes to smaller, more detailed, helps me, one, make sure the balance of large, medium, and small shapes is good, which is usually a compositional thing, and also forces me to make sure that I am not putting in way too many details in an area that does not actually need to be detailed. It's a little bit hard to explain what I mean by that without giving specific examples, so again, I had used a very general wash on the background of blue, and then I used a more medium-sized brush to get the majority of tree shapes in, and then I used only a few trees to have more focus as they are closer to the house to be painted in with a smaller brush, just to give it that extra sharpness and to have contrast, not just in color, but in shape and in detail. Sometimes it is very difficult to balance these things. That is one of the nice things about working in traditional media that makes it easier, is I have to typically sit and wait for my paint to dry, so I'm forced to sort of take a breather and take everything in, and that tends to help as well. These are all very general rules and things that I quite often fudge depending on what I'm working on, and they're not hard, fast rules. Just like any general artwork rule is just there to use as a tool to help you work more efficiently, work more clearly, just to get whatever you want to accomplish accomplished. You're always more than welcome to bend and change whatever rules about artwork you need to. But generally, those are things that help me keep in focus, avoid overworking, and also get better color balance, since color is something, I don't know if you've noticed, that I tend to avoid, at least especially in the last few years. But this was a lot of fun to work on. It's one of the paintings that I'm probably going to keep in my portfolio for a long time. It turned out well. I really like how detailed I was able to go with the house without it feeling overworked. It's always a very fine line to ride between getting the right amount of details you need on a piece to really make it feel finished, feel finalized, but while also still maintaining, that painterly element. Hopefully this was a little bit informative for you about some of the things I think about. If you are interested in seeing more detailed tutorials from me, I would be more than happy to oblige. I have thought about doing potential learn to draw live streams on my Twitch channel, but if you'd like to see that brought over here to YouTube, please let me know. Although I've been painting and drawing for well over a decade, I feel like I am constantly learning new things and constantly picking up new techniques and ways of adding to my craft, and I am always happy to share those with others just because, well, if I knew how to think about medium to large shapes or think about changing my brush size at certain points in a painting, 5 years ago, imagine how great at painting I would be now. So I personally never mind sharing the wealth. I do also have prints, stickers, and more available of this painting, as well as previous paintings in my Redbubble shop, also linked below. Redbubble is a pretty good way to support me, as I currently don't create or ship any merch myself, so I use this website, and I make about 25% of all profits from there. But it's been a good help, and I've been using it for a few years, and I've really appreciated the support from folks who have bought prints or stickers or masks. From me in the past, you have my entire heart for helping support me and what I love to do. One thing I suppose I will briefly touch on is materials. I mentioned at the beginning of this video that this was painted in a simple sketchbook. It is not 100% cotton. It is not traditional watercolor paper. However, I am used to personally working with that limitation. I don't have a lot of paper that is meant for specifically watercolor because it is expensive. I am poor and cheap and have other bills to pay. But that doesn't mean I can't make a good painting with the specific materials I do have. And again, that is part of the reason why thinking about colors not just in local color, but in hot versus cold, can help you work with your limitations. So if you only have 4 pigments that you can work with, you can still mix your colors accordingly and make it work. It's all about figuring out what you've got and making it work. It's kind of the fun challenge of art, I would say. But yep, here is the final painting. You can see some of the graininess as colors bled and mixed in a different way than it would on actual cotton watercolor, but it's still something I really enjoy, and quite frankly, it gives it new character. I really appreciate you guys for tuning in today. Hopefully this was an interesting little insight. As always, I will have all of my social media listed below, including all of the ways you can support me, both by just liking and reblogging, or by potentially throwing your money at me. Either way, enjoy your day, and stay creative. I'll see you next time.